Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Tech Talk, talking to your kids about online safety. This is hosted by the National Cybersecurity Alliance and Palo Alto Networks. I'm Lisa Plaggemier, the Executive Director of the National Cybersecurity Alliance. This is such an important topic. I know from my own personal experience, you want your kids to make use of all the promise that technology brings and the convenience. But there are times, especially if your kids are adolescents, that it feels like it's absolutely fraught with peril. Giving a kid their first phone can be a harrowing experience, and it can be hard to keep up for parents. Technology changes so quickly. We've got two experts joining us today who have kids themselves, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Kalinda, would you start, please?
Yeah, thanks so much, Lisa. Hi, my name is Kalinda Reyna. I'm the Chief Privacy Officer at LinkedIn, but for the purposes of this event, I am a mom of three, and I am also the creator of a video channel called Raising the Digital Future that you can find on YouTube, where I talk to parents and kids about some of the ways to manage and navigate going online in our current world.
Thank you. Thanks for being here today. Niall, would you introduce yourself, please? And we'll let you get started with the first presentation.
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon all, and special thanks to Lisa for the invitation to speak here, and really excited to be speaking with Kalinda on this event. Something that's certainly very near and dear to my heart. I've got a 5-year-old at home and a 2-year-old at home. Both have tablets, and I struggle with this on a daily basis. So again, Niall, Browne, CISO, Palo Alto Networks, and really looking forward to having this conversation today, sharing some lessons learned, and hopefully getting as many interactive questions as possible from participants. Right, so let me kind of kick off from there. So what we did in Palo Alto Networks, so we spent a lot of time talking with companies and organizations and how did they protect themselves. So some of the largest banks, some of the largest governments in the world, how do you protect yourself basically from compromise? And sometimes, that's hugely beneficial because you're doing good and you're protecting organizations and countries from compromise. But it's also very important to protect the most important things in your life, and that's your kids. So when you look at your kids and you look at your children, how do you protect and how do you secure them? And how do you make sure basically that they're very much aware of security best practices? So this is something we created about 2 or 3 years ago, A.C.E.S, and it stands for Activities in Cybersecurity Education for Students. And it's really the ability for students of different ages to learn about cybersecurity best practices, to become more aware of basically the threats that are out there, and really how to embrace technology, how to become that digital citizen whereby they can leverage technology on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Because technology is inherently good, but as with any new form, you need to make sure it's used appropriately from there. So with that, maybe next slide, please. So what is A.C.E.S and what is involved there? So what we did is we created 16 different lessons for kids and learning about cybersecurity best practices. And if you think about it, you want to make this age appropriate. The model whereby one size fits all doesn't work. If you speak the same to a 3-year-old as you do to a 5-year-old to a 16-year-old, you'll find in your daily life, you'll get very mixed results, and they won't be good results from there. So you really want to create the model whereby it's age appropriate, you're talking to children itself, and you're focusing on, depending on their development level, what they should be doing and how they should be embracing and using technology on a daily basis. So we kick it off at 5 years old. But when my kid was 4, we brought him through the A.C.E.S program kind of end to end. And it starts off with physical security. They have a device, they have a tablet, and as part of the tablet itself is like when they're leaving the car, don't leave the tablet in plain sight, because if you do, someone's going to break into your car and steal your tablet. Make sure there's a password on there or somebody's going to steal your data. So it's really kind of talking through with the kids on everything from like physical security, how they and their presence can be tracked online, who are they talking to? Like this is every parent's like spidey sense. So, you hear a person's name that's mentioned and you're like, who's that kid and what ages they are, who their parents are. And especially when you look at online, it's much more. So like when my children are playing computer games and it's invariably Roblox and they mention name, straight away, I'm just like, who's that? Is that a child or is that an adult from there? So it's really building the model basically with children, how they understand and use technology, and also inclusion, very, very important basically. How do you create that inclusive society whereby you're interacting with other digital citizens on a day-to-day basis, you're being respectful to each other, and really kind of building the model whereby, you know, you could be a great kid basically in the physical world, but in the meta world or basically or online, you know, you could be a terrible person. So it's really, how do you blend the characters themselves whereby when kids are online, they're respectful of each other from there. And then going into 8 to 10-year-olds, it gets a bit more complex. We start talking about digital footprints, who they are, GPS locations, passwords, bullying, which is obviously huge issue kind of online, whereby anybody can reach out to your kids pretty much at any time, and they can bully them from there. So how do you deal with that? It's tough enough in a playground whereby there's a teacher watching the kids between basically 8 and 4. Now, as they can interact with the kids 24/7, how do you build that sense of security, privacy, and how do you build that persona within children basically, whereby they're aware of bullying and they can identify it and they know how to respond accordingly from there. And then when you go to 11 and 13, it's everything from making sure secure access. Like, are you going to connect from your laptop in Wi-Fi that says hack me, to basically talking about personal information online, to looking at information. We all hear about basically information whereby people are sharing misinformation online. So how can they look and validate misinformation from real information from there? Social media is obviously huge. Most children spend a lot of their day when they're out using technology on social media. Like, and there's numerous different versions. Like, what are they, and how do you secure that? And then straight up to 14, 15, whereby now you're looking at like different methods of user authentication. You're talking about personally identifiable information, first name, last name, their home address, what school they go to, all the way basically to how they get scammed, to like copyright. So, you know, if you're 14, 15, you're watching movies online, but you want to make sure that they're copyrighted. You're not stealing movies and watching those from there. So the whole purpose behind A.C.E.S was to create basically a set of lessons across 4 different kind of categories from there, where anybody can deliver that training course. And up to this point, we've had about 1,400 classes worldwide that have been trained on A.C.E.S. So that's enough on the content. How can you, as a parent or as a teacher, how can you participate? So let's maybe take a look at this. Next slide, please. So very, very simple. Anybody can participate. I went through the whole course myself for my children. If you're a parent, if you're an adult, if you're a teacher, very simply, you go to paloaltonetworks.com/CyberAces. You can download the programs. Each of the programs comes in 4 different sections, and it starts with simple things like talking about introduction, vocabulary, what are some of the activities, what are some of the tips that you should follow, and then also additional activities you can from there. So it's easy to download. It's for free. We've had numerous basic universities, all the way down to kindergartens, basically go through the A.C.E.S program for individuals. And it's really about it's simply think about it for the most part. You have the common sense already. This is simple basic models whereby simple steps and programs that you can follow, working closely, interactively with children to make sure that when they're online, they're safe and secure, not only when they're 5, but all the way up to 50, because common sense and security, you learn it at a very, very early stage from there. Next, please. And then finally, basically, it's really the model whereby if you've gone through the program from there, you know, feel free to give feedback. Like, we're continuously changing the A.C.E.S program based on the feedback from you, the parent, and you, the teacher from there. Any questions, feel free at any time to drop an email to cyberaces@paloaltonetworks.com. And then also basically on top of that, like if you want more information, or you want one of the Palo Alto Networks employees basically to volunteer their time to teach either your class or your children, we're certainly more than happy to sign up for that. We've got hundreds of employees, including myself and Palo Alto Networks, that have signed up basically for this program, whereby we can teach this program anywhere in the world as needed from there. And then finally, like one of the key things we have within Palo Alto Networks is we have Okyo. It's a cybersecurity device for the home. What we're actually doing is we're giving one of those available free to anybody in the audience. So if you've signed up, if you've registered and you've clicked on the tab for be contacted by paloaltonetworks.com, you've already gone into the hat from that point of view. What do you get? You get the Okyo device for your home, 3-year subscription, and then somebody from Palo basically will help you install that device from there. So again, take a look at your email. Certainly this week, if you've won, we'll send you an email from cybersecurity education at paloaltonetworks.com. And thank you.
Thanks, Niall. That's super cool to do a giveaway, and that Cyber A.C.E.S program is fantastic. We actually had a question come in specifically for you before we get to Kalinda's talk about whether or not this has been shared with any of the any school districts or state departments of education around the country, anything like that, because this person's comment is that this is foundational. This is great stuff.
No, it's an excellent question. Yeah. And certainly what we've done is we've done a lot of outreach to schools and universities in relation to like, this is what the program is. Because for the most part, again, people have the common sense. It's like the simple teaching tips from there. Kids don't have a lot of attention. So 30 minutes, cover the core fundamentals. And then if anybody, if you're in a school or university, or if you're a parent and you want to teach your kid or your class, like feel free to reach out, and we have a whole team that helps as part of this. Again, this is all volunteer work on our side.
And I think Ashley from Palo Alto Networks just put a comment in the chat that they're happy to have you reach out to them if you're on the call today and you happen to be from a school district. I think a few of you are in the education space. I recognize a couple of names in the audience. Then feel free to reach out to Palo Alto. One more question, then we'll move on to Kalinda. Is there any specific reason why this stuff it ends at age 15? Curriculum.
Yeah, good question. I think it's more just on the modular side. We ended at 4.15. For the next versions, we're looking at like, do we go further up to 16 to kind of 18 from there, and then get more advanced scenarios. So that's something we're considering to doing. But it's a great question because it's a lifelong experience. Like you can get scammed when you're 5, the same as you can be scammed when you're 15, 50, 75 from there. So it's a continuous like education cycle. And based on this feedback, I think it's probably maybe an additional module we can add in there for the teenagers. Now, the problem is that at that age, they think they know everything at that point, but at least we'll try to make it as relevant as possible.
Then when they're in their 20s, they come back around and suddenly parents know what they're talking about again, and authorities know what they're saying again. Yeah. Well, good stuff. Thank you very much. Kalinda, we're going to turn it over to you now to talk about what you've created.
Thanks, Lisa. And I'm so glad to hear that they do come around. That's nice to hear. So, and I have to say, Niall, I'm just so impressed with the work that Palo Alto Networks is doing here. I hope that more tech companies will continue to do the same. I have 3 kids, as I mentioned. My oldest is turning 14, so I've got the teen years. My middle just turned 11 and is finishing 5th grade, where they did a course on digital citizenship. So a lot of the concepts Niall was referencing are things that we worked through this past year with him. And then my youngest just turned 7 and went through remote school last year and has had her first year of real 1st grade. So that's sort of the group of people that have kept me very focused as a parent on the issue of raising people in this digital world. My professional background is that I have been doing data privacy since 1996. Got interested in the issue before a lot of what we see today online really existed, but I was really enthralled by the idea that we could share so much of ourselves with people that we may not know, and that we could interact and build relationships, which now 20 plus years later are really deep and enriching, but also really hard for us as parents who are putting children out into a world that, as Niall was saying, you can be scammed at 5, at 10, at 50, at 70. Any of the dangers that exist for us as adults exist when we put our children out into the internet, because there aren't quite honestly, a lot of protections. And frankly, the internet was not designed for kids. So it's an environment they use daily, and that we as parents, especially over the past 2 years, have had to get more comfortable with. But there aren't a lot of ways for us to protect our kids. And as someone who has done a career in data privacy, I found that I was really struggling myself with some of these issues for my kids. And so I decided to start a YouTube channel to give some quick and easy tips of things I've used with my kids or that I've learned about through my career to help give parents a sense of things. So we could go to the next slide. And this is really just to say, I think a lot of what I was going over, which is how much this issue pervades our lives and our children's lives. So, in the past 2 years, I have seen a significant change from my kids in terms of how much of their lives have to be lived online versus what used to be the case when I could put more limits in place by saying, okay, you only get screen time Saturdays and Sunday mornings in place of cartoons, and you can't have things in your room. When we went to remote school, everything changed. My kids needed to be in a room by themselves with technology. There's not a tremendous amount of oversight by schools. So many more schools could use programs like what Palo Alto Networks has put together here. And quite honestly, everybody was scrambling, parents, teachers, kids, just to make things work. So what we saw, especially in my home, was a shift in terms of how much my kids were doing online. Now they were doing their piano lessons, their interaction socially, their education, all of their Brownie troop meetings, Boy Scout meetings, everything was happening online. And I very quickly had to be able to talk to them about what it means to be online and some of those dangers. We could go to the next slide. And just to give a sense for all of us of that universe that we are dealing with, Niall touched on this a bit, but there are so many touch points for our kids today and so many wonderful things they can access by being online. I used to have this rule that you could only be on an iPad on a weekend, not a school night. And then when the pandemic happened, I noticed that that's how my kids were socializing. That's how my son was making music. That's how they were doing art. So the idea of what kids can do online is so broad. The community building, the socialization, the downtime through gaming. Even just yesterday, I was on with a healthcare provider doing a telehealth appointment. So the amount of data being created about our kids, the amount of situations that they have to be able to navigate online has really shifted and is shifting in this generation. And part of my goal is for us who are parents and educators to help this generation truly understand some of the extraordinary things they can accomplish online, but also some of the things they need to be aware of, as Niall pointed out, for their own safety, but also for creating a future world online that is something everyone wants to be a part of, that is safe, that is thoughtful, that is human, that is taking account of all the voices in the room, that is kind and not full of bullying. And I think that's part of our roles as parents in introducing our kids to tech. If we could go to the next slide. And part of the struggle for all of us, I just finished a book on the international laws that exist for kids on privacy and safety, of which there are not as many as you'd think. It's a bit cobbled together globally, and here in the US, we don't have a tremendous amount to help us as parents. This really came to light for me in a situation where I had a colleague who heads up at a very senior level a trust division at a tech company, and called me because his child had been videotaped in a bathroom on a private school campus. The video was then shared unbeknownst to his child with kids on multiple networks, TikTok, Snap, and Discord. And he was reaching out to me saying, what can I do? And amazingly, in researching that, I realized there's not a lot of laws out there that you have that can help you with situations like that as parents, especially if you are in a private school. So the laws that are out there today, we have COPPA, which is the reason why for any of you who have kids under 13, you're constantly being asked to give approval on things, and you're probably like me, just hitting okay, because that is supposed to get parental consent. I worked a lot on that law when I was in my role at Apple and at Nintendo previously. And then in California, we do have a Consumer Privacy Act that is requiring kids 13 to 16 to opt in for the sale of their data. But quite frankly, that's not the biggest risk to them. And then the Children's Internet Protection Act exists. But again, that's only for schools or libraries that are receiving E-rate funding. So it doesn't cover all the ways in which your kids might find content online that's objectionable. We could go to the next slide. I just wanted to list out a couple of resources for folks, but generally, I think hats off to all the parents out there who are struggling with some of these issues and even joining us here today to learn more about how to manage them. I think I am extraordinarily appreciative of not only organizations that are helping us to navigate this, but also companies like Palo Alto Networks who are trying to do something to create that education link that kids need. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kalinda. With your career and 3 children, I'm not sure where you found the time to create what you've created, but I'm sure it's the folks on the call today will really appreciate it when they take a look. So we've had a few more questions come in, and then I've got some on prepared questions in case we tried to hit some of the highlights here, some commonalities in some of the questions that might be coming in. Can we put the resource slide back up again, please, briefly, while we do a little Q&A? So we had Bill asks about freezing your child's credit. I know that's advice that we at the National Cybersecurity Alliance give all the time. And Bill says it's a shame that you have to send something in physically. You can't do it online. I haven't checked the process lately. That's my guess is that's probably to keep somebody who's not you or not your child from freezing your child's credit, because as we like to say in the security world, if it's online, it's vulnerable. So that's probably a really safe approach from the credit bureaus to make sure that it's actually you as your child's parent freezing their credit. But that is super good advice, because a lot of times, you know, your infant who gets their new social security number has a nice clean social security number, and that's worth a lot on the dark web, and they might not realize that they've been the victim of identity theft until they go to buy a car or apply for a credit card or something many years down the road. So that's super good advice. So we have a question from Paul. Our school district uses Google OS and YouTube is included. I was informed I could not delete YouTube. Whoops, where did it go? I could not delete YouTube access because of licensing. YouTube videos have clips embedded to legitimate clips with very malicious videos. In other words, you're watching a video on YouTube of a cartoon or something, and then partway through the embedded clip starts to play with something malicious in it, like, saying something about self-harm or something malicious. The original legitimate video then continues after that clip. Are either you aware of a way? This is the first time hearing about this. This is horrible. Can you stop this or prevent this in any way? I'm not sure, aside from reporting it to YouTube, would be my first instinct. Do you guys have any thoughts on that one?
I'd love to know from now the security technical solution, because I'm sure there's one, but I was just going to note that if it was happening on a school device, and if for some reason I thought that was part of the issue, is the school wouldn't take the licensing off. And so in that situation, schools do have acceptable use policies, and they do have IT administrators. And I would strongly recommend, as a parent, going to the IT administrator, pointing out this problem and suggesting that the school or the district actually work with Google to solve it, because that seems like a pretty significant risk for a lot of children, especially if they're doing it on school devices where they're being required to potentially look at YouTube videos for school or other things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point Glenda made. Like, if you look at, like, a lot of times, basically, especially with platforms, they package different applications, and from an enterprise point of view, you always have a choice. So in our case, we can say, well, we want the docs and we want the spreadsheets, but we don't want YouTube. If as an enterprise side, we have that choice. On the school side as well, it's more than likely that they have that. So I think that was a great point that was made, Glenda. And it's all about interacting between parents and basically and the school. I think too, basically, it's a model whereby, so in my case, I've got a 2-year-old. So I'm not putting my 2-year-old on YouTube. So he's on YouTube for Kids. And then YouTube for Kids is set under, I've created explicit account for him. And then basically, to Glenda's point, when you look at age appropriation, I put the kid, or Ethan in my case, as 2 years old. So he has access to very little restricted content from there. And then I go into YouTube Kids, and then I change the settings even further from there. So I spend some time just reducing the permissions. The problem is real life scenario. A 5-year-old doesn't want to go into YouTube for Kids because he's a big guy now at this point. So he said, Daddy, no YouTube for Kids. So I put him onto YouTube. And again, I went through the same process of, here's age is 5, reducing the permissions. But to the earlier point, basically, it's not foolproof. I mean, the model of Zachary in my case was afraid of the wind. And I was trying to explain to him that you don't need to be afraid of the wind. The wind is fine. It's your friend. It cleans the air, butterflies and airplanes. And that was great. And then I went downstairs and he was on YouTube watching hurricanes in Florida. And that took it to the next level. So you have to be very, very, very careful, because the problem is, if they're interested in such a topic, it can lead them down like the wrong path. So I had to explain how in California, it's very, very safe. There's no earthquakes, so there's no fires or anything along that line. So that's a bit of a fib on that side. But at the end of the day, it's really a case of reducing the apps, reducing the permissions, certainly on the technical side. And in some case, there is some residual risk. And again, to Glenda's point, that's why interacting with the school and the school board, I certainly wouldn't accept that answer that, all of these are bundled, because if I'm paying for something as an enterprise, that's never the case.
Thank you for that. Great answers, both of you. When is the best time, and either one of you can take this or both, when is the right time to start talking to your kids about their online existence?
So my response to that to parents is as early as possible, which sounds really odd for those of you who maybe even have infants. But the reality is that the minute kids are in this world, they are observing their parents full time. And I guarantee, as a parent, you are spending some time looking at a phone and your child's observing it. And so one of the recommendations that I have is, from a very young age, explaining to kids with your phone, Mommy's on here reading the news. That's what informs me. Or Mommy's on here doing, or Daddy, doing my emails. I'm doing work. Because one of the earliest things that happens with devices is that kids start to think that that is just a form of entertainment, another friend. It's something everyone almost has attached to them because they see adults walking around all day like this, right? So from a very young age, explaining to them what that device is and what its place is in the way your family wants to define it, I think is really important. And then I actually started talking with my kids because, I'm a privacy advocate, it's a little weird, started talking from like the age that they were getting on an iPad, so 2 or so. What do we allowed to go on? Only these apps, right? And then eventually we started having conversations about what do you want to be sharing and what do you not. So to the fact that my daughter is so hyper aware. Her name is her age is 7. and she has a bag with her name Avani on it. And she was saying to me, this might be a little bit too much, but she was like, if I walk around with this bag, people will know my name and be able to say my name. And then I might think I know them and I don't. So I need to be thoughtful about when I use this bag. It's like, yeah,
Wow.
you do. But it's getting them a sense of the fact of how, when they are online or even in the real world, the information they put out there, the ways in which they interact, is important. And to know that the people they're interacting with, I'd love to hear from Niall how he's dealing with this, with the 2-year-old, because they're not yet interacting fully, but my kids have an understanding that they are not allowed to interact with people online unless they know them in the real world. And that's an important conversation, I think, that needs to start at like 4, because that's how early people could start to be trying to interact with them when they're on an iPad or some other device.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. I think it's a great point. You've got to interact as early as possible from there. Like if you wait until they're 4, 5, 6, 7, it's almost too late at that point. The kids are using technology now from the age of like 1, like you're showing them. And to your point, it's not just pure entertainment. It can be educational as well. I remember for my kids, basically learning them to look at letters, look at animals, look at different sounds. I went ahead and I got my iPad, and first thing I bought was ABC Mouse. And then they spent a lot of time just like learning the different sounds, and it was hugely, tremendously beneficial from there. And then the big thing is really it's you want to draw parallels. So in the real world, basically, you've got the concept of, in the physical world, you've got the concept of stranger danger. So very similar, and you really want to get your kids to be street smart, whereby it's like, do I know this person? Like, who is that puppy from that end? So it's really the kind of the natural caution, like when you interact with people, and at the same time, basically enjoying life as well. And same thing as well, if you want your kids to be street smart, you also want them to be cyber smart as well. You want them to be able to look at these things and say, and question it. Like, so why does this person, why are they connecting into me from there? Like, do I know them? Do I know their parents from that end? They're giving me 10 Roblox coins. Why are they giving me 10 Roblox coins? They keep on following me on Roblox. So a lot of this is like, you're in the real world, and if somebody gives you money and starts following you, that's extremely suspicious. Same thing in cybersecurity from there, whereby if you're online in a game and people are reaching out to you, it's like, well, put it in the scenario whereby if they reach out to you physically, well, that's a risk. Same thing in cyber, same thing as well, and a lot of this ties back into like the common sense model. Like, if somebody, like, because devices for the most part, like they're on a lot at the time. Like if someone knocks into your door at 10 o'clock at night, like you're not going to answer that door. You're just going to look through the peephole. I never answer the door after 10, never, ever from that end. So you're always watching. And similarly with the kids, it's like, would you answer the door at 10 o'clock? No, Dad, I wouldn't. Well, then if somebody pings you basically at such and such a time, should you respond? Like, no. So it's really kind of the model of like, again, it's a lot of times people try to solve issues with technology, and that always fails. Instead, it's like, how do you build people that are have inherent common sense? They have that in the real world, and how do you bring that out in the cyber world as well? And the way you do it is, to Glenda's point, you start touching on this as early as possible.
Thank you for that. We've had another question come in. What is the best way to navigate conversations with people about not sharing your child's photo on social media? So for example, they go to a party or something, and somebody else shares their photo. How do you start that conversation without sounding a little paranoid and without having it be awkward?
Yeah, I think certainly just in my case, like, it's something that I would be very cautious of. And especially like if you look at these days with facial recognition, you go to Google Photos and you type in your name or your cousin's name, and you see every photo back to the time when they were a baby, and you're like, wow, like, so in other words, as soon as you put a photo online, it's searched, it's indexed from there, and it can be found by anybody. And then when they're either applying for a job, or somebody basically is trying to learn more about them from there, if there's images online, it's highly risky from there. So oftentimes with me, it's the conversation of like, talking to, I've got my business personal life, and then I've got my business life in there. Shouldn't share personal photos kind of online. And then especially when it comes to children itself, it's all about education. You're educating the kids about cybersecurity common sense. You're educating your relations as well, your aunt and your grandaunt. Sure, they're cute kids sort of thing, but I really don't want their photos online. And it's simply the model whereby I'm going through, well, what's the worst that could happen? Well, the worst could happen basically. Now they can track the kids. They look at the photo and the kid is standing inside of the dress of the house from there, or they see them down the beach, or they see them in a compromised location. They see them in the school. Now they know they go to such and such a school. School finishes at 4 o'clock every day, sort of thing. So again, it can get very dangerous very quickly, and people will go online and search and index and try to find this data. So again, it's really about the model of like indexing. And for me, this would be like a line in the sand. Like I would never have pictures of any of my kids online on the internet for any reason ever.
So Lisa, I'm going to jump in on that one because it is extraordinarily hard as they get older to manage this issue. So I'm going to give a couple of responses. One is, first and foremost, as parents, you will find that in every summer camp and in every school, you are going to be asked if you give permission for your child's photo to be taken and shared. I have always said no to that. And then what started happening was they would send out pictures from field trips and my kid wouldn't be in it. So I'm going to say, it's tough. This is a really hard issue. I have been to birthday parties and had to say to the mom, hey, that was such a great picture, but do you mind just texting it to the people at the party and not putting it up on Facebook? So that, I think, culture is shifting a lot more than it was when my oldest was younger, because when about 9 years ago, every party you went to, someone took a picture and wanted to put it up on Facebook. I think that culture is very much shifting, but where it's not with other parents, but where it's not shifting, again, is in the school usage. So make sure that you are clear with the school if they don't give you a form that you don't want pictures used or shared. And then grandparents, just like you were saying, Niall, it's the very proud relatives. My mother-in-law and I have had quite a few discussions about her use of Facebook. I don't know what to do other than outright ban her, but here's my advice. I'm very thoughtful now about which pictures I text to her, because I know that if I text her a picture, it could end up on Facebook. We've also had multiple conversations explaining what I do for a living and how I feel about this. And yet she's very proud of her grandkids. So I would say, one way is to definitely have the conversation, which can be extraordinarily awkward. The way I was able to have it with my mother-in-law most successfully was to bring the kids into it. So to say to her, this is something that gets easier as your kids get older, because my oldest now can speak for himself about how he feels about this. But I have said, you have to recognize there's no pictures in existence on the internet of you as a child, Mom. So why are you putting my child in that position, right? Is that fair to them that you're determining what their future record is and not them? So that has seemed to kind of resonate with her. The other thing I would say is, and this happened for my husband and I, we had very differing views of what could be shared online. He saw our family photos from trips as something to post on Facebook as a record of our trip. And of course, you can all tell that did not go down well. This was one of our biggest arguments, because I was actually speaking at an event at Microsoft to parents of teenagers about how to protect their kids online. And a friend of mine at Microsoft came up and said, oh, she's just posted all the pictures of your trip to Europe. You guys look great on the beach. And I called him and I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, no, it's just our parents are going to look at it. I'm like, no, that's not the case. So what ended up happening, which I think is a great idea for couples to do in families, is we ended up having a discussion about it as a family with our kids included. So before anything gets posted, we ask our kids opinion. Are you okay with this being posted? Is this a place you're comfortable? And why are we posting this? Is there a value to it for us as a family, to you as an individual? And you can even do it in a way that's kind of fun for the kids, of having some sort of contract as a family about what we're comfortable sharing online and what we're not.
Those are some pretty insightful and hysterical examples. Niall, a question about cyber ACEs. What you showed us, the topics are different depending on a student's age. So what is important to consider when it comes to what topics you handle at what ages? So how did Palo Alto Networks decide what the progression of that curriculum would be? What are the factors to consider there as far as what topics you cover at what ages?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So a lot of times we spoke to the kids, and it's like what resonates. Like if you start talking to them about PII when they're 5, they don't really kind of understand that model. But it's the likes of saying what they do understand is like if the remote control goes missing, it's a huge issue. If the iPad goes missing, it's a huge issue as well. So starting with physical security. So on the physical security side, how do they protect that device to make sure it doesn't get lost? How do they make sure there's a passcode on that? And how are they and again, it's common sense. It's like, here's a device. How do you keep that physically secure? So once they have that in their mind, whereby it's technology they need to keep physically safe, then it's very easy to go to the next step and say, oh, by the way, you're protecting your physical device, but then what about you? You're on this technology device from there. And then as part of that, how do you make sure that nobody knows your name, what school you go to, what sports you play to? And again, it's just that transition. And again, it's going through step by step physical security, then going through the model whereby now that you're online and other people can reach out to you, do you want to be friends with everybody, or should you be friends with a certain amount of people? So, and then it's going through friends and who do you allow, and then parents, and then kind of building that model of knowledge. Oftentimes from our point of view, it's that simple conversation. We originally rolled it out across a number of basically the employees, children, got feedback, and then incorporated that as part of the program from there. But I would certainly if I would find what my 5-year-old is that once you can logically explain the reasoning behind that, then it becomes very, very easy. One example on the 5-year-old course, there is a section 2.2, and it covers basically the concept of, it's called the footprint hunt. And the footprint hunt is focused on the kids have to identify 4 different types of personas out there by who the footprint is. So again, it's the model, right? What kind of footprint is this? Is this a person who you want to trust or who you don't want to trust? And again, it's tying back into Easter hunts and bunny hunts and stranger hunts from there. And it's about building, it's really about challenging them, whereby they're continuously, and now they're at the point whereby when my kid is as soon as I drop him off for baseball on Saturday, he's like, Dad, we gotta hide the laptop or the iPad basically, because a thief might steal it. And then we participate in we generally just hide it underneath the mat of the car, but don't tell anybody that. And now basically, if we're online, it's he's looking at this and he's like, hey, should I share my name? So again, it's that kind of conversation and that chat kind of going back and forth. And I think the most important thing is kind of the open line of communication. You just don't want to teach this once. To Glenda's point, this should be almost like a daily kind of conversation. Hey, who are you talking to today on Roblox, or who did you play with in school, and who did you play with cyber online? Again, it's starting those conversations at 5, and then by the time you get up to 15, you can do more advanced topics. And I think one of the key things across the board there is the concept of when you look at cybersecurity, you look at privacy, it's the concept how do you create that digital citizen whereby they're not bullying kids and they're not being bullied as well. So really kind of building that model instead of just basically protecting themselves, how can they create an ecosystem whereby they're interacting in a respectful way? Because if you were in a playground and you saw your kid kick another kid or another kid your kid, you'd be in there in a second solving it from there. You also need to have that visibility when it comes to the cyber world, especially as people are moving more and more to the concept of the virtual world and the meta world. So again, I think it's the model whereby it's that constant communication at an early stage and having those daily, hey, Zippy, you've got like 12 friends. Do you really have 12 friends? Like, and then are they allowed to friend you in? So it's, again, it's that continuous comms back and forth.
You brought up cyberbullying, and spoiler alert, we're going to be doing a campaign on cyberbullying around back to school time, the late summer. Actually, Jesse is working on for us. So we'll have, if you're running a training awareness program and you want some more assets and campaign assets to run a campaign in your organization for families around cyberbullying, we'll be producing things for you. Back in the day when I was a kid, if somebody bullied you, you could run to a teacher or you could run home. And Kalinda, that isn't the case anymore on the internet. So kids won't always tell you when something online is happening. So how do we encourage them to report, and how do we stay on top of this to know whether or not our kids are actually bullying or being bullied?
Yeah, such a good question. And especially I feel like right now and here in the US with so much of what we are seeing, these mass shootings, it really makes me feel like we need to remind our kids of the humanity of the people that they're interacting with online, because in a lot of those situations, the individual who took the action was someone who was making plans online, interacting with people online, and people had an opportunity to potentially give advice. So first and foremost with cyberbullying, I think our kids don't know what it is. Like, it's important to define it, because I think kids assume that cyberbullying will be obvious. When I was a kid, my mom would tell me, don't talk to strangers. So I assumed a stranger would be super obvious to me. And of course they aren't, right? And so I think it's about sitting down with them at the first point at which they are going to begin interacting online with other people. I did this with my daughter in kindergarten because she did remote school online. And we had a conversation about what is kind behavior when we are interacting with someone we're not in person with. How do we treat people and how do we do that? It gets a lot more complicated at the age my middle son is at, which is 5th grade, 4th and 5th grade. You start to see what we might typically think of as cyberbullying, and then on into the teen years. So I think it's important first to help kids identify. It may not just happen in the gaming space. It may happen over an email. It could happen both in the physical world and in the virtual world. It could happen in many different forms. And it could also happen in places you don't even know about. So my kids, for example, do not yet have cell phones. They have to be 14 to have a cell phone. So if someone was bullying them on something like Snap by posting pictures that were, not appropriate or saying mean things, they wouldn't even know, right? So first and foremost, helping them define what is that bullying, and then understanding that there can be bullying both in person and online. And then secondly, what can they do when they see it? And that's one of the hardest things, because online, the bullying may disappear. If it's on Snap, it might go away. You may not quite, you might have sent a text and then, have deleted the text on your end and it's still sitting on someone else's. So how do we make sure that they know to tell us about it? So telling them, hey, if you see something that you think would make you feel bad, you need to go tell a teacher or come talk to us. As Niall said, the key to all of this is maintaining that line of communication and letting them know it's something to talk about and something they may see. And then again, also telling them as they get older, like my teenager, how would you report this to, if you're on an Xbox, how do you report it? If you're on Snap, how do you report it? And then so you can also help them alert organizations. But I think one of the hardest things with cyberbullying is really helping the kids feel like they can identify it and they feel confident in what they should do when they see it. And then also, of course, just reminding our own kids to never be that bully. What does it mean to be a human being online, to remember that you're always interacting with another person who has feelings on the other side?
Yeah, from personal experience, I'll add as well, there comes a time when maybe it's hard to keep those communication channels open when your kids get into adolescence. So it's as long as there's somebody in their life that they would tell. It could be an aunt or an uncle or someone at your place of worship, like a youth leader or something, or the pediatrician during a regular checkup. It might be a person that they feel really comfortable talking to. It could be any adult in their life, somebody who runs maybe one of the organizations or clubs or after school activities, a coach, something like that. It doesn't always have to be you.
At least I'm so glad we have all generations of parents here, and that is such a good point, because I'm still in the phase where I'm almost not getting all the information, but he is still talking a bit. But yes, I'm curious, some of the things with cyberbullying, the worst cases, the most disturbing things often are the way teenagers perceive a situation or react to a situation. And that's, you're absolutely right, when we no longer have that ability to communicate and quite get the full story or see what's going on or have that involvement. And that's why some of these things, for those of you who have kids who aren't yet at that teen or preteen, it's important to start building while they're still hearing us.
Yeah. I get to middle school and beyond, and a lot of it's not their fault. It's chemistry, it's brain chemistry, right? And hormones, and they can be nasty to each other. And so it's just really important to talk about it. As far as resources, so as I mentioned, we're going to be providing resources on cyberbullying. Kalinda, is there anything else, or Niall, that comes to mind as far as resources that parents can use around cyberbullying?
I think there's one of the modules that we have basically on A.C.E.S, and to Kalinda's point, it deals specifically with this, and a lot of this deals with one thing. It's two things. One is self-esteem. So how do you build up this self-esteem in that person, whereby it's like, that's not nice, and if someone treats you badly, like, you've got the confidence and the self-esteem whereby you look at it and say, well, that's not acceptable. I'm not going to accept that. So that's part one, and building that self-confidence. It's not just part of the that's part of like day-to-day life, physical and online from there. And then two, the big thing is, someone kicks you in the playground and it's bad. But then online, it's like somebody kills you. It's like, well, that's just a game sort of thing. Like, so it's like, where is that line, and where do you draw that? And Kalinda pointed out what's acceptable and what's not acceptable from there. So one of the modules we've built into A.C.E.S is the model whereby, like, what's considered good and bad behavior. So like some examples would be like, it's like, I'm happy when people like a lot of posts, and then I feel sad basically when I don't get any posts. And then there's examples whereby if I get a negative comment, I feel good or bad. If I feel a positive comment, I feel really good. So it's really the concept of like, A, it's the bullying component, but B, like, if you're on a social media platform from there, you're not really feeling good about being on the social media platform, talking with the parent itself, should you really be on Snapchat? Should you be on TikTok? Should you be on Facebook from there? And then but it's really about building that self-esteem. And then what's not acceptable? It's not acceptable basically to like post nasty comments about another kid, or have nasty comments posted about you. If it does, then it's the self-esteem whereby they reach out to the parent. And generally kids will do, like, well, I drive my son home from school most or probably every day. And, I usually get the rundown of like, this kid was nice to me and this kid was not nice to me, sort of thing. So they have the inherent sense of right and wrong and fairness. And to Kalinda's point, it's simply like, how do you translate that into the cyber world? A.C.E.S is just one example, and I'm sure Kalinda has like plenty of other ones whereby it's how do you build up that sense of self-esteem, and like what's acceptable and what's not, and really, who do you tell?
Absolutely. Thanks. Those are all such good points. And I will say, for those of you who may be dealing with older kids, I would say nobully.org is a great organization that works to stop cyberbullying. The other thing that I would say, where this stuff gets so hard, is from a legal standpoint, what rights do your children have? If there is something involved with sexting or cyberbullying, it is very hard to often get police attention on that. There are not a lot of things. A parent can feel very helpless in those situations about how to resolve. I think if you're in the public school system in the US, you have a better chance of the administration helping you and being required to, especially in California. However, if you're in private schools, I think you will find that your ability to influence the administration or get something done is much harder, because the laws that do exist in terms of cyberbullying aren't always applicable to a private school property. The other trouble can be is if it's not happening on school property, although it's students at the school, how do you get help? And one of the things I'd recommend is look at the platforms that are being used for the cyberbullying and reach out to their trust and safety teams. They do have all of the tech companies, especially those with the social media aspect, will have someone, whether you go to their chief privacy officer or their head of trust and safety, who you
We lose Kalinda? I think we lost Kalinda. Yeah. Oh, she's back.
Sorry.
You're back.
Sorry, did you get the reach out to? Maybe not.
We missed the very end, I think.
Okay, I was just saying that every tech company, especially those with the social media presence,
Yep.
will have someone either in trust and safety. And if you can't reach the head of trust and safety, go to the chief privacy officer, and that will help.
Great, thank you very much. I think we're about out of time. We did not get to all of our questions. It's a pretty hot topic. There's going to be a recorded version of this webinar available. If there's stuff you didn't catch, there's lots of links in the chat, which you can grab real quick now before we end. Other than that, please visit us at StaySafeOnline.org. I want to thank Kalinda and Niall and for the insight today. It always fascinates me, executives in the technology realm and the advice they give to their own kids and their own families and the way they manage these things. It's super enlightening. Thank you very much. The resources that were mentioned today are available on the link that you see on the left, the Cybersecurity Education and Career Resources page on StaySafeOnline.org. And there's a whole bunch more on that page. All kinds of resources for teachers and kids and parents and people who, all the way up to people who want to study cybersecurity or get a job in cybersecurity or want to change careers and move into security. But thank you very much for joining us today. And thanks again, Kalinda and Niall.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, guys.